Hey, my name's TC Burr. Welcome to Yet, a podcast created to encourage you to get your goal or idea out of your head and into reality. On this podcast, you'll hear stories, encouragements, tips, and ideas to help you write your book, start your business, launch your podcast, or whatever it is you hope to accomplish. Because it's not that you haven't done it, it's just that you haven't done it yet. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Yet podcast. Today on the podcast, I want to talk about what you can do to keep writing when you aren't feeling particularly inspired. So writer's block is something that if you've been writing for any amount of time, you've probably dealt with at some point. I'm going to share with you 4 ideas, 4 tips that might help you keep writing even when you're feeling particularly low on inspiration. So I'm excited to share this with you. But before we get there, I want to just take a moment and introduce myself. So if you're new here, my name is TC Burr. I am a writer, a podcaster. I'm also a dad, a husband, a corporate employee. And for the last year or so, I've been working on my debut novel, and I can't wait to share this out with the rest of the world. I don't know when it's going to be completely done, but I've finished the first draft and I'm continuing to work on it, revise it, edit. And I've also started this podcast to encourage other writers, other creatives, other entrepreneurs to don't just sit on your idea, to turn it from a dream or an idea into a reality. So I want to encourage you on this show to get started and to keep going. So if it's your first time listening, I'm so glad you're here. Hey, if you've listened to every single episode, also, thank you for coming. I'm glad that you're here. Just want to share a little bit about who I am. And if it is your first time, I think this is going to be a good one because it's one, again, that I think every writer, no matter how long you've been writing, you've probably dealt with this one at some point. So let's get into it. So if you are sitting down to write, you've probably had this moment, right? Like you sit down and you open up your laptop or your notebook or whatever your system is to start writing, and you have those moments where you just have tons of ideas. You're inspired. The characters are springing to life before your eyes. You start writing, and it's almost like you aren't even in control. Your fingers are flying over that keyboard, or the pencil is just racing across the page, and the inspiration is free flowing. And those moments as a writer are incredible. But if you're like me, those are not what it always is like. In fact, they may not even be the most frequent moments. More often, for me at least, I sit down to write and the cursor flashes at me and I don't know what to say or how to explain this thing. And that's where you can get into troubles. You know, I want to talk about a couple of things you can do when you have those moments where you aren't particularly inspired. No matter how you try, you think of ideas, you're trying to come up with something new, but how do you keep making progress? How do you keep writing even when that inspiration isn't free flowing? Well, here's a couple of ideas. Idea number 1. Write using an outline. Now, if you've been following along with this show or with my content for a while, you know this one might seem a little controversial because I generally don't write from an outline. So I posted on my blog recently kind of talking about the 2 main approaches that many novelists use when it comes to writing their book. There are people who are plotters, who plot out every aspect of their story and then start writing. And there's some great benefits to that. But then there are also people like me who just kind of start writing and see what happens. And this works so well for me because I just love the idea of a blank canvas or an open road or a weekend calendar with nothing on it. Like, give me that every time because I love the freedom and the excitement and the adventure that's embedded in that. But one of the inherent risks is, what if you aren't feeling particularly inspired on a given day? If you're not writing from an outline, you might not know where to go or what to do. But if you do set up an outline up front, this is a tried and true method for many authors, and it comes with a long list of benefits. Perhaps the biggest one, though, is a clear path and direction that can help jumpstart you on those days when you are not feeling particularly inspired. So idea number 1, how to keep writing even when you aren't feeling inspiration, is to write using an outline. Idea number 2, capture your Ideas. This is a big one. So there's a guy, an author, keynote speaker, John Acuff. He says that he doesn't actually believe in writer's block. What he believes in is idea bankruptcy. And so one of the things that I love to do is capture my ideas as they come to me. So wouldn't it be great if during that 1 hour or that 2 hour time block that you've set up to write, all of your inspiration that could have accumulated throughout that week just comes rushing to mind, and you can just write and write and write and be fueled with that inspiration? That would be amazing, wouldn't it? But that's not how it generally happens. If you're like me, your inspiration comes when you're in line at the grocery store or you're out walking the dog, or many, many times it happens for me when I'm driving down the interstate. An idea, a thought will come to me. And the danger is if you don't capture that thought, oftentimes you will lose it. So my friend Elle, who's been a guest on this podcast, talked about that. Like, she has to sometimes even pull over on the side of the road to write something down, or it's going to be completely gone. And so I would encourage you to do that. Capture as many ideas as you can, even the ones that might seem obscure or insignificant. You never know how they might play into your story at some point in the future. So it's important to think about kind of what collection system you would use here. And so you may have, if you're old school, you may have a pen and paper. You may do this via the Notes app in your phone or other methods. I would encourage you actually to have multiple collection systems, because depending on where you are and what setting you're in, you may or may not be able to use all of them. So for example, if you work at a desk, let's say you work from home and you work from a general desk, a general same spot every day, you could have a notebook there that just sits next to your computer. And anytime something comes up, you can just scribble it down. But that doesn't work if you're going, 70 miles an hour down the interstate. So in those cases, maybe you do need to pull over and jot something down. Maybe you could leverage the voice app on your phone. So anyway, I would encourage you to have multiple collection systems that you can use depending on where you are. But I do think it's important to consolidate all that data into one place. And I would encourage you to make it be a digital place. Maybe it's something as simple as a spreadsheet, but it gives you ideas that are then sortable, searchable. You can kind of find those things in the future, and it will give you almost an unlimited reservoir of resources from which to pull ideas, inspiration. This can be, character development. It can be specific scenes, plot points, you name it. Collect all those ideas as they come to you, and you will be able to lean on them in the future. Side note on this one, this is great for novelists, obviously, or for authors, people who are writing books, but it's not just limited to that space, right? Like, if you are a writer, if you're a business owner, if you're anybody who has an online presence, so you got a website or social media, you will get ideas and inspiration related to those things as well. Capture those too, because they could end up making great posts on social media or blog posts or video content, or really the possibilities are endless. But if you don't capture this content, it's going to get lost. Capture as much as you can. And again, if you're an author specifically, you're going to need a social media presence. So I've got a couple of episodes coming up where I bring some guests on and we talk marketing, which, by the way, authors, that's something you've got to do. You've got to get your name out there, get your book out there, and probably earlier than you think. But don't worry, I've got some guests who are going to talk us through what that looks like. But even ideas for that, what that could look like for you, you can capture those, accumulate those, and then build up that kind of reserve that you can pull from in the future. Idea number one, to keep writing when you are not feeling inspired. Number one is to use an outline. Number two, capture your ideas. Number three, have multiple works in progress. So I think this is great advice. Again, I got this from a previous podcast guest. She told me she always has multiple books going at once. Now, this may not work for everybody. I get it. It's hard enough to just write one book. But if you've got a couple of different ideas, which lots of times maybe that's the case, you can be working on your primary work. But if for whatever reason you get to a point and you start stalling out, you can't really feel like you're making progress on that particular book, you could shift your focus for a while and focus on something else and make progress on that one. So I think that's just such a brilliant perspective to have multiple works in progress, multiple books that you're working on, so that if you feel like you're kind of stalling out in one, you can shift your focus and still move forward in your overall progress. This doesn't have to be just limited to books either. So again, if you can't find the words to write a story, this is where you could also do some of those other things like create a blog post, create a video. You could talk yourself about how you overcome or how you wrestle through writer's block. Again, the possibilities are endless, but if you have more kind of things that you're working on, you can kind of refocus and redirect some of that energy. And sometimes doing that is enough to just give you that spark and to keep you going. Number 3, the third way that I think you can continue writing, even if you aren't feeling particularly inspired, is to have multiple works in progress. And number 4, the fourth tip or idea that I have to share with you about how to keep writing when you aren't feeling inspired is just don't. And I know that might sound crazy, but sometimes, guys, sometimes we just need a break. Like you can get so laser focused and so bogged down in this world that you're creating and this story that you're writing that, it can be frustrating when you can't make progress, when you can't feel like you can't move forward. And if you're like me, you give yourself goals and deadlines and you want to hit your word counts and you want to make sure that you're able to be finished with your draft or your edit or your revision by X date. But I think sometimes it can be really helpful just to push back from the desk, step away for a few minutes and just take a breath. And so maybe for you, that is you need to take a day off, you need to take a week off, a month off, right? It really depends, but I want you to think clearly about give yourself the freedom to step away. So many, many times, the only deadlines that we are pursuing are the deadlines that we've given ourselves. And so be kind to yourself. If you need to take a walk outside, feel the freedom to do it. Guys, your book is going to be right there waiting for you when you get back. So don't discount or undervalue rest in your work. Work is super important and can be super rewarding, but you've got to be doing it from a place of rest. So take care of yourself. If you need to step away, allow yourself space, close the laptop, put the notebook down, and step away. There's lots of things you can do to do that. Obviously, you can get into nature. You can spend time with the people that you love. Don't feel like you're a failure, by the way, for just stepping away. It's super important to do that sometimes. And so oftentimes when you get out in nature, you put the book to the side for a bit. That's when you can start to take in the world around you. And that's when some new inspiration can kind of spring up. So again, just to summarize today's episode, this is all about what you can do to keep writing even when you're not feeling particularly inspired. So number 1, write using an outline. This will give you a clear path and direction that can help jumpstart you when ideas aren't free flowing as normal. Number 2, capture your ideas. Use different collection methods, but try to put this all into one digital place that you can easily sort and search and draw from in the future. Number 3, have multiple projects or multiple works in progress going at the same time. This could be more than one book, or it could be a book plus a blog, or a book plus a website, or a video content, or whatever the case might be. If you aren't feeling particularly inspired in one area, you can redirect your focus and still make progress, even if it isn't in your primary work. And number 4, the last and fourth idea to keep making progress, even when you aren't feeling inspired, is to feel free to take a break. It may seem like a step backwards, a step in the wrong direction, but I'm telling you, sometimes just stepping away and taking a breath can fill you back up and give you fresh inspiration to start over brand new, or to keep going and keep pursuing the goal that you've set after to accomplish. So that's it for today. It was a quick one, a solo episode today, but I'm so glad you joined. If you liked what you heard out of today's show, would you share it with someone else, a friend or a relative? Post it on social media. I would love to connect this podcast to as many people as possible. And so if it benefited you, I'd really appreciate it if you share it out. Also, I would love if you would be willing to write a review for the podcast. The reviews that I've seen have been so encouraging, and it just kind of affirms what I'm doing and helps inspire me to keep going. And so if you would go to Apple Podcasts and write a quick review, just let others know that what this podcast has meant for you and how it's helped you. Thanks. Again, coming soon, I've got a couple of guests that are going to talk about how to market your book. So what does that look like? How and why should authors create an online presence and get some visibility and get people to know, like, and trust the thing that they're working on?
So until then, I hope you have a great week, and I will talk to you soon. Later.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you would do me a huge favor, if you got value out of this podcast, which I'm assuming maybe you did since you're still here, would you scroll down to the bottom of your podcast app and rate and review the show? And maybe share it with someone on social media or with a friend, just in a conversation. It would mean so much to get this message out to more people, and I think it would be amazing if you would share it. So that would be, as a personal favor to me, I'd really love it. Also, if you want to know more about me and what I'm working on, you can visit my website. It's tcburr.com. I hope you'll check it out. You can contact me there. Thanks again, and I really appreciate it.